Okay, and on to reading 3. Now, I found this to be really difficult, this one. I don't know if it's just me, but um, the the connection between the meaning in the text and the questions wasn't very clear. You had to really understand. You needed a really deep understanding of the meaning in the text. So, wow, I think it was very difficult, this one. So don't feel too bad if you didn't do well in it. I think they made it difficult because passage 1 and passage 2 were fairly reasonable, and so they had to really make this one super tough. So anyway, let's see what we can do. There are techniques that we can follow, and then we'll get to the difficult stuff later, which is the understanding. So we've got one of these. These can be very tough because they tend to really paraphrase these things. That's why they can be difficult. We've got a summary, but it's a summary with a box, and so that can get really difficult. I've said to you before, summary without a box is generally easier than summary with a box because these words, they can use some crazy synonyms, and sometimes it's not even really that synonym connected. And then, of course, we've got some multiple choice. Right, so now the first thing that you're going to do, I don't want you to go straight for the summary just yet. We want to just try and find where everything is as much as we can. Now, I've said often before, we're going to go straight to the multiple choice just to find where they come from. Don't do the multiple choice, but if you know where they come from, it will help you to find where these others come from, because they will choose it from somewhere else, usually. So usually in the multiple choice, they say in the first paragraph, in the fifth, in the sixth paragraph. They don't do that here, but we do have lots of names. So we're going to go and look for all of these names, and we're going to start, and there's Chinese and Japanese. That's quite nice to scan for. We see Jack Zipes is there again, and then we've got another name over here. So we're just going to go and find these names just to find where they're taking these multiple choice from, and then we come back to them later. Now, because this is 38, 39, 40, I'm going to start at the end. So we want Tirani, Zipes, Chinese, Japanese, Matthias, Clausen. So we're going to start around here. We can even work backwards and find there's the last one. And then, you see, when they introduce him, they say where he comes from, or they say what his job is. That means it's the first time in the passage that is mentioned. So you can be confident that he doesn't come before. Jack Zipes at the University of Minnesota. We wanted Chinese and Japanese somewhere in between those two, and we see that over there. And then this name Tehrani, but Tehrani, I start seeing Tehrani there, and scan backwards, and I see Tehrani there. So now I'm immediately getting a little bit suspicious. I think, okay, Tehrani's everywhere, and so I'm not going to go and look for that one. I'm not wasting too much time just yet. This might be one of those cases where they've taken these three from a certain place, and then they've taken this one from like the beginning or something. They can do that. So I've discovered enough information for now. We're going to do most of our multiple choice from just these two last paragraphs. That makes me think, okay, where the summary is probably going to start coming from just before that. But let's go and look and see if we can find a summary. Maybe this word, it's a big strange word, Little Red Riding Hood, will jump out a lot. Now, is there anything in here that you can see? There's the name again. I'm seeing this name a lot now, so I'm starting to think it's everywhere. And the only thing that I can see in this is 58 stories, which is not really good, but at least it's at the beginning. And then maybe something at the end. Important, no. Story survival, I don't think so. So if we can find phylogenetic analysis, Little Red Riding Hood, 58 stories. So of course it's not going to be here, it'll be somewhere before. And now you can either decide to scan backwards or you can decide to scan forwards. But Little Red Riding Hood is what we want to see. So we're going to try and find the beginning of the summary, I think. We want Little Red Riding Hood. And then I start seeing it all over the place. 1, 2 over there, and 3 over there. Now, I'm taking a bit of a guess here, and I'm thinking that the first questions are going to come from somewhere up here, and the summary is going to start over there. It's a guess. It won't always happen like that, but it's worth just checking because it would be the most simple solution. And immediately I do see Tehrani's analysis over there. So then I'm just looking around here. Maybe look a little bit back, and there I see phylogenetic analysis. I see that phylogenetic analysis is in inverted commas, which means it's the first time that it's been mentioned in this text. And there's Little Red Riding Hood. So now I'm starting to feel quite good that we're probably looking at all of this for the summary, which is actually not good news because that's a lot of text just for a few answers. And it's a summary with a box, so I'm starting to get a little bit scared. Let's see if we can just find 58 stories from somewhere around there. So we're over here somewhere, and scan, 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 and there we see 58 stories. Okay, so now what I'm thinking is, let me just do some colors here so you can see. I'm thinking that this is the multiple choice except for the first one. This is the summary, and therefore this is the first ones. All right, that makes me think, do I want to do the summary now? It's obviously very big, very difficult, but I'm going to go with it and start with the summary just to see. Maybe it's easy. But anyway, this is what I needed you to do in the first couple of minutes of this passage, is just get a general idea of where everything is. So that we can do, no problem. That's just exam technique. Right. And we're back. Okay. So then I would then take a look at the summary and see how easy or difficult it is. So we've got the 58 stories. Let's start there. He used techniques from evolutionary biology. That's an interesting, that's a good keyword maybe, to find out if something existed. Oh, let me just mention, grammar not going to help us. We've got two gerunds over there, and we've got one single noun over there, but these are all plural nouns or uncountable noun. And so they're all nouns, first of all, so that's not going to help us. Previous summary in the box that we did in this Cam 15, there were some adjectives and nouns, but here it's all nouns. But also, most of them are plural or uncountable, which means there will not be in front of it. Even these two gerunds or the singular noun, that should have in front of it, but I saw later on they've got things like this, some sort of, and actually there you can have, can you have plural? I think actually there would be a singular, but it's not really helping us. It's all in the past tense, so we can't use the verbs. The verb's not going to help us. Then I was hoping maybe, like if they have ending, we would have to see an ending. If we have warning, you have to see a warning. Plot, a plot. But I see no singles over there. So maybe it helped us a little bit. And it told us that ending, warning, and plot are unlikely. But then you can have some sort of warning, and that works. So actually, grammar is not helping us at all, unfortunately. Right, let's go and see if we can find this one. He used techniques from evolutionary biology to find out if something existed among 58 stories around the world. He also wanted to know, wanted to know which aspects of the stories had fewest something. Fewest, I like fewest. He also wanted to know, okay, he used techniques from evolutionary biology to find out if something existed among those 58 stories. And where's the 58 stories? Up here. So I don't see evolutionary biology. Maybe it's somewhere before. Variants of these two tails. Oh, it's a long clause. Checking for variants. This is a whole big like gerund clause. he ended up with 58 stories recorded from oral traditions. Once his phylogenetic analysis had established that they were indeed related, so this is also the 58 stories were indeed related, he used the same methods to explore how they have developed and altered over time. Woo! I don't see anything. I don't really see anything, so I'm going to skip it. Found out if something existed among those stories. Checking for variants, maybe. And no, I'm going to skip it. This is looking a bit too difficult for me. One thing that I did like is I saw the fewest. Which aspects of stories had fewest? Now that's usually something that we can find, fewest or the lowest amount or the least. So now I'm scanning a little bit for that, and I see it over there finally. That wasn't easy to find, don't worry. Actually, what I also did is I thought, okay, whoa, this is starting to look like a really difficult summary here. So let's see if we can find more like where things come from. Let's see if we can find more keywords, scanning words, and see if there's anything else in there. Contrary to these beliefs, no included tended to change over time, and that the middle of a story I liked. I highlighted that. Middle of a story seemed no more important than the other parts. I'm just confusing you. Let me make everything yellow. I just wanted to also, because it's functional language. Okay, middle of a story I kind of liked. Anything else? Parts of a story which seem to provide some sort of something unimportant and important. So maybe unimportant and important, but that'll be everywhere. The only real thing that I saw is middle of a story, because it's quite a specific thing and you can't really paraphrase it. So I went looking for middle of a story. And scan. Remember, we're scanning through all of this. Scan, middle of a story, and eventually I found it over there. So that just gave me a little bit more information about where everything is. Assuming that they've done everything in order, which they have. They have, for the summaries, they do everything in order. Sometimes within a sentence they change the order. So middle of a story is down there. So I know that these three are before that. Right, so he also wanted to know which aspects of the stories had fewest. That's where we were. Fewest. Fewest what? Least what? Which aspects of the story had fewest? And that's actually quite nice. Which aspects of the story is there? Be careful, it could be red herrings, but in this case it's not. Which aspects of the stories had fewest, had least what? And they've made the grammar quite difficult actually. Which aspects of the story alter? That's a verb. The least or least. Which aspects of the story alter least? Another way of saying that is which aspects of the story had the least alterations? And that's the paraphrase that they've done. And then on top of that, they've changed alterations into a synonym. So can you see alterations in the box? And yes, there it is over there, F. And I think that was the easiest one in this whole summary. Anyway, as he believed these blah blah blah. Contrary to other beliefs, maybe we can find that. He found that something that were included in a story tended to change over time, and that the middle of the story seemed no more important. So I did find middle of a story, but we've got that. I'm probably just going to start over here because it's more likely that it will be over here, because we've got central section of a story. Can you see change over time? There's rate of evolution of incidents compared with that of characters. Found no significant difference in the rate of evolution. So that's no significant difference. We want to find some did change over time. So it's not really incidents. but there are lots of other details that can evolve quite freely. So there is change over time, is the evolve. So it's the details that evolved quite freely. Right. Oh, it's confusing. Okay, so we want to look at details. There are details that evolve quite freely. Is there anything in the box here that reminds you of details? He believed aspects would be the most important ones. Contrary to other beliefs, he found that some details that were included in a story tended to change over time. It would work. And there's nothing here that's really close to details. But I would say that one is the closest to details. It's not exactly the same, but it's details in a story, events in a story. It's close enough. Actually, that also means events, but I don't like that one because he found no difference in the rate of incidents compared with that of characters. So it's a bit confusing when here that no difference is when you compare it with characters. But he's talking about incidents and episodes and details. They're all synonyms for the same thing, which are events. So yeah, that one you had to guess a bit. If you found the word details, you would have to just go here and look at it and say, okay, which one is the most similar to details? It's not a very close synonym, but in the context, it is close. In the context, he's using the word details in that paragraph to mean events. All three of these words mean events: incidents, episodes, and details. Right. No help from IELTS. If you wanted at this point, you've looked at the summary and you've thought, wow, no, I do not know what is going on here. I'm wasting my time. It's not a bad idea then to go and look over here or even go to the multiple choice, because they're also going to be difficult, but they're all difficult, so it doesn't matter where you go. But okay, we're going to persist with this. Let's see if we can go back. No, I'll go back to that later. He was also surprised at parts of a story. Let's see anything about surprise. And there we see surprise. Okay, but the really big surprise came when he looked at the cautionary elements of the story. Studies suggest, what are we looking for? So we kind of found surprise. The parts of a story which seemed to provide some sort of something were unimportant. The aspect he found most important in a story survival was. So we want what is unimportant and what is important. The really surprise when he looked at the cautionary elements of the story, these narratives, studies suggest, so he doesn't say that, studies suggest that these narratives, the cautionary elements of the story, are important. However, so once again, we've seen this many times, important information after however or but, yet. However, yet in his analysis, such elements were just as flexible as seemingly trivial details. Now, I don't expect you to know that word, but that word means unimportant. What then is important? So they've ended it up with a question. We're going to skip the unimportant one, and we see that they asked the question and they're going to answer the question in the next paragraph. What is important? The answer is fear. Fear is important. So is there anything that we have for fear? Because here is the most important thing. And just notice this structure. When they ask a question like that at the end of a paragraph and they give an answer in the news paragraph, that's important information. All right, so fear is the most important. And can you see anything about fear? Warning, no, links, records, variation. And that's the closest to fear that I can see. So I would put G over there, but it's not a very close synonym to fear, but it's the closest that we can see. Anyway, so we can go back and find these other more difficult ones. Some sort of that were unimportant. So unfortunately, you had to know that trivial is unimportant. And such elements are unimportant, trivial. What are such elements? The cautionary elements. This is the reference pronoun. Such elements are unimportant. Cautionary elements is unimportant. What is the word to caution somebody? To warn somebody. Warning elements are unimportant. Very difficult. Where is that? And then I would go back. I mean, actually at this stage I might just guess because we've got lots of other things to do, but let's just go back to find out if something existed among those stories. So we want to know, he's looking to find out, checking for is the key word, to find out, looking for variance in these two tales. Okay, so, no, he checked the variance, sorry, that's not really the key word. He ended up with, again, I'm getting confused. So, yeah, I would have actually gone for that because I like that. He's trying to find out for variance, and I would look for variance, and then I would have gotten confused and I would have seen, oopsie, so the variations is over there. So it's actually quite confusing because he is looking for variance, but I've already used variance, but it's not the answer. I might have even got that one wrong, I don't know. Checking for variance, blah, 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 blah. He ended up with this. And this is actually our sentence. Once his analysis had established that they were indeed related. So the first thing that he found out, established, was that they were related. And that's what this also is. This is the second part of that sentence. He also wanted to know, had they changed over time? But here he wanted to know if they were related. And what word can you see over here? That they were related. Connections, they were connected. Yeah, and there it is over there. I'm not sure I would have even gotten that one if they had links. So that was from there. They were indeed related, they were indeed connected, they were indeed linked. All right, that might be the most difficult summary that I have ever seen, because the understanding of these words and the synonyms that they used were very, very difficult. All right, so now if you want to go to this, it's fine, or if you want to go to multiple choice, it's fine, because both of them are going to be super difficult. So let's go to this. We know that it's probably these two paragraphs. Maybe there's some overlap down here. They also like to do that. But it's only 2 paragraphs, lots of marks, 5 marks. So let's try. All right, so what have we got? First thing we're going to do is look around and see if there's any nice keywords or anything like that. But there's nothing really strong to scan for. So all we've got to do is we're going to assume that that comes from the first paragraph, maybe the first couple of lines, and go for it. In fairy tales, details of the plot. You'll see in these, the grammar doesn't help us. I've never seen grammar helping in this question type, because they make every sentence with the same grammar. So every sentence is grammatically possible. I think maybe once or twice I remember when 1 or 2 of them weren't grammatically possible, but they are aware that you'll be checking the grammar there. So every sentence will be grammatically possible, so forget about the grammar for this. In fairy tales, details of the plot. In fairy tales, details of the plot. And what are we going to do? I mean, fairy tales there. So fairy tales is going to be everywhere. And the first sentence gives us our answer. So actually here we're going to be skimming, and then we're going to be doing detailed reading, People of every culture tell each other fairy tales, but that might help us a little bit. The same story often takes a variety of forms in different parts of the world. Do we see anything about that? Biological research? No. Reason for their survival? No. Show considerable global variation? Yes. Different parts of the world. Animals transform to become humans? No. Spoken rather than written? No. And developed without factual basis? No. So, unfortunately, that's all I can tell you. You had to just read it and go through these and see if you could find anything that helped you. So yes, that's. I think I'm not helping you a lot here. One is C. Let's see if there's anything else we can see that can actually help us. He rejects the idea that the useful lessons for life in fairy tales, something. Now, maybe you're thinking you could scan for this or you could scan for this, but it looks like they've paraphrased both of these quite strongly. There's quite a lot of words here that we can scan for, but the problem is these ones don't have to be in order. These ones have to be in order in the text, but these ones are obviously mixed up. So scanning for these isn't really going to help us because they can be anywhere. We'd have to scan all through everything. He rejects the idea that the useful lessons for life in fairy tales. So I like this, rejects the idea. It's quite strong. I want to find something that this guy says, no, I don't agree. The useful lessons for life in fairy tales. And again, it's now we're looking for Terani, so that can help us a little bit. We can see this is the first time that they introduced Terani. So we're only going to be looking, I would actually look in this whole paragraph, but we're not going to look for the rest of this over here, because Terani is introduced over there. So I would actually read the whole thing. The appeal of these tales, these stories, is because they contain cautionary messages. It might be that what we find interesting is that it's got survival information, but his research suggests otherwise, and that's where he rejects the idea. His research suggests otherwise. What did they say? So what idea does he reject? That what we find interesting about the story is that it's got survival relevant information in it, and then he rejects that idea. So what idea is he rejecting? That it's got survival relevant information in it. Nothing about biological research. Reason for their survival, they've put that in just as a red herring, I think. Contain animals? No. Were originally spoken? No. And without factual basis? No. So yes, I would have to go with this one. Are the reason for their survival? So let's just check that. He rejects the idea that the useful lessons for life in fairy tales are the reason for their survival. He rejects this idea. What we find interesting is that it's got the survival relevant information in it here. Okay, I'm just going to say yes, fine. For me, this survival and the survival in the question are a little bit different, but it's close enough. At this stage, we're a bit desperate. For me, that would be close enough. You're going to start guessing a little bit when you're in this kind of situation. Why is my keyboard not working? There we go. All right. Okay, let's see. Various theories about the social significance of fairy tales. So we want various theories and we want social significance of fairy tales. Various theories and social significance of fairy tales. We have, this is all that he's saying. That hasn't stopped these people theories. So there's theories. I don't know why I'm making everything pink. Don't worry. Devising theories to explain the importance in human society. This is social significance. Okay. That hasn't stopped. 1, 2, 3, all of these making various theories to explain their importance. What is that? We have a huge gap in our knowledge about this history, despite the fact that we know it's an ancient one. Okay. Various theories, no biological research. This we've done. And this we've done. Contain animals, no. Were spoken rather than written, no. And yes, have been developed without factual basis. Without factual basis is we have a huge gap in our knowledge is without factual basis. So that was very important. We have this huge gap in our knowledge. That means various theories, in spite of that fact, various theories have evolved. Oh. So, yeah, what is that? F. Okay. Insights into the development of fairy tales. All the fairy tales analyzed him. Insights into the development of fairy tales. And now we're somewhere over here to work out biologists. Tehrani has found a way to test these ideas, borrowing a technique from evolutionary biologists. I just see that, and I remember we've got biological research. It's probably going to be close enough for me. Insights into the development may be provided through methods used in biological research. So all they're saying over here is that there's the method from the question. So we can borrow a method from biological research, and we can test these ideas. That means we can get insights into these ideas. How you're supposed to get that one, I don't know, but there it is. And so this one was out. And that is out. So, and all the fairy tales analyzed by him, animals, humans, spoken rather than written, and that got really nasty. Nothing. I think the animals and humans is probably around somewhere, but he ended up with those 58, which were recorded from oral traditions. So all of the ones that he did were spoken, were originally spoken rather than written, because they were recorded from oral traditions. Oral is spoken. So as you can see, I don't know what IELTS is doing here. They're just being mean. Even a native speaker will struggle to figure these answers out, I can guarantee you. And onto the lovely multiple choice. I think these are going to be awesome. What method did he use to test his ideas? So we have to go to where? I wouldn't start with that one, because that one could be anywhere. We will come back to that one. When discussing his views, Jack Zipes suggests that. Okay, let's go and look at Jack Zipes. So fortunately, Jack Zipes is only those 2 lines. So let's look. He is unconvinced by Tehrani's views, so he doesn't agree. Even if they're gruesome, they won't stick. What is they? Fairy tales. They won't stick unless they matter. He believes the perennial theme of women in stories explains why they continue to feel relevant. It's a good example of how the important information is at the end of the sentence. They are, unless they matter, unless they're relevant, then the stories will not last. That is what Jack Zipes is saying. Matter and relevant. Key change in the role of women. I know that women is in there, but he gives it he gives it as an example. It's not the main thing that he is saying. So very nasty red herring there. Stories not taken seriously, no. Importance of violence, no. Features of stories only survive if they have a deeper significance, and there is only if they matter, only if they are relevant, then they will survive. So you should probably just go and read this. They won't stick. That means stick there means survive. So they only survive if they are important. So I was hoping the multiple choice would be a little bit easier, but it's not. Why does it refer to Japanese and Chinese fairy tales? But Tehrani points out, so now they're arguing, they're disagreeing. Although this is often the case in Western, it's not always true elsewhere. For example, in Japanese versions, blah, 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 the villain is a woman, and in Nigeria, the victim is a boy. Why does he bring this into it? Why does he mention them? Because he's disagreeing with Jack Zipes, and that's why he's using it as an example to disagree with Jack Zipes. So that's why he introduces those fairy tales as an example of why he disagrees with Zipes. What does Claassen believe about fairy tales? At this stage, I'm just laughing. I'm just guessing. You're running out of time. You're exhausted, and this is super difficult. So, oof. Okay, what does Claassen believe about fairy tales? What does Claassen believe about fairy tales? Claassen believes this. Claassen believes that. So that's quite nice. It's the last sentence. Scary stories teach us what it feels like to be afraid without having to experience real danger. So build up resistance to negative emotions. Teach us what it feels like to be afraid without having to have real danger. And that is a safe way of learning to deal with fear. Safe without danger. Teach blah, 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 blah. And then we'll go back to this one. What method did he use? He compared oral and written forms of the same stories. No, that was a red herring. That's just because he wrote down these stories that were originally oral traditions. He didn't compare oral and written versions. He looked at many different forms of the same basic story. Yes, he looked at unrelated stories from many different countries. They were from many different countries, but they were not unrelated. Remember, we saw that they all had links. They were all linked. Where is it? They were indeed related. So no for that one. And he contrasted fairy tales with that of living creatures. I don't see anything about that. So we'll just go back to this. He looked at many different forms of the same basic story. Where? And focused on Little Red Riding Hood, which is the same story in its many forms. So there it is. Right. Okay, so I'm sorry if I couldn't help you a lot there, but you get to a point where it's just so difficult that it really just depends on how well you understand these things. And like I say, the reason they did this is because Passage 1 and Passage 2 were relatively straightforward. If I had to give this stuff, I can remember like my Band 5 students in Vietnam, sometimes I had to give them something like this and they just look at me like I'm crazy. Teacher, what are you doing? How can we understand this? You could even hear from my voice during this that I was getting confused at some point. So if you can get 6 for this, and then maybe you get lucky and you guess a few and you get 7, 8. 8 would be an excellent score for this reading. All right, good. I hope it helped a little bit. We did do some techniques about finding where things come from. Unfortunately, the grammar didn't help us, but you could at least narrow down where they came from. But do notice that there was some overlap. This one came from this paragraph over there. So I guess there's no overlap. It's from that sentence, and then they start with the summary. No, Yeah. This one was all the way back there, and then the summary started, and then they started again with the multiple choice. So that was also very nasty. All right, let's finish with that. Move on to test 4.